I need then something because my battery will. Yeah, now they're trying to find a solution because my plug is not fitting. It's full now, but it's no 26. Oh, we have it. Good. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I will not go. Okay. Yes. Done. Good. So I leave as is or what? You will be changing the screens. Where is my mouse? Yes, okay. Yeah, it is. Done? Done?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. We'll be starting the official program. Welcome to the 11th public lecture here at the NCHE. The program will be officially starting in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 1800 hours here on 9th of March, 2023. We're coming to you live here in Windhoek, Namibia. It's not just the people here, it's also those joining us online. Please give yourself a round of applause, even if you're at home online. Give yourself a round of applause for making time out here to be with us. These are the people who are, that extra student when they get an A+. These are the ones that get the A+ because they work all day and they know the importance of social dialogue in improving the outcome of our national development efforts, and therefore they've made the time. Also, those of you joining us online, thank you very much for making the time out here to join us for this discussion here. My name is Patrick Sam. I'll be the moderator here tonight for this very important discussion where we will be speaking about enhancing higher education systems, performance and efficiency through minimum standards. We have our international guests as well as local guests that are joining us to welcome our international guests. So please feel at home. A few house rules. Please make sure that your phones are on silent. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that your phones are on silent. For those of you who might need the restrooms, please use the back door over there, and it should be to your left if you're facing that way. Those are the only two house rules for the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Executive Director, that is of the NCHE, Mr. Hano Shipena, as well as the Chairperson of the NCHE Council, that is Mr. Samuel John, as well as the Deputy Chair, Ms. Sylvia Demas, with the Deputy ED, Ms. Sylvia Demas, as well as the Deputy Chair, Dr. Francine Kenjele, and as well as the Executive Director, Dr. Alfred van Kent, representing the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation. And ladies and gentlemen, our special guest, please let's give her a warm Namibian welcome here to the land of the brave. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Susanna Karakhanyan to what we call the land of the brave, people who I think are known for punching beyond their weight. They always say, Namibia, how do you guys manage to be friends to all? How do you manage to do all of these things? There's an intricate secret about this country, Dr. Susanna. They say that the oldest vegetations are deserts. And living in the UAE, you are very familiar to the desert. But they say our desert is the oldest desert. And so I'll leave the starting question in your head of where did life begin if the oldest things are here? So there's a very special place here in our hearts, and we're very welcome to have you here to learn, I think, in terms of what the world is doing. A lot of the times we want to ensure that we aren't just inward looking, but we're also outward looking. And we try and find the balance between being inward looking as well as being outward looking. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let me just give you a brief introduction to those of you who don't understand what the NCHE does and what the function of the NCHE is. This is the 11th public lecture, and part of the mandates of the NCHE is to host these lectures so that there is a component of social dialogue. And I've been doing this for many years, and somebody asked me, what happens after these discussions? What happens to this profound knowledge that is generated at these public dialogues? And then somebody answered and said, all of you have power. Power as a citizen, power in your institutions, power in your professions, in your personal capacities, and you can take the knowledge that is gathered here into those places of power. So please, that's the significance of our public lectures. The National Council of Higher Education is a statutory body established by the Higher Education Act of 2003. NCHE's functions, amongst others, are to promote for the establishment of a coordinated higher education system and quality assurance in higher education. Moreover, Section 6D allows the NCHE to undertake such research with regards to its objects as it is may necessary or as the minister may acquire. The convening of the public lecture on the topical issue is intended to affect and impact the higher education sector, as one of the activities of the NCHE is to undertake on the annual basis and fulfill one of its functions as contemplated in the Act. So that's why we are here, ladies and gentlemen. This is beyond a statutory requirement. We're here to ensure quality. And to give you the welcoming remarks, please put your hands together for the Executive Director of the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Alfred van Kent.
Thank you, Director of Ceremonies. Professor Samuel John, the Chairperson of the NCHE Council. I understand that the Deputy Chairperson is also around, and other members of the NCHE Council, the Executive Director, Mr. Hanno Sipena of NCHE, Mrs. Sylvia Diamas, the Deputy of the NCHE, Dr. Raimo Nanda, the Deputy Executive Director of the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation, our distinguished presenter, Dr. Karakhanyan, I hope I pronounce it close by, our keynote speaker for this evening, welcome. The staff of NCHE, our distinguished participants, both physically present here and those on the virtual platforms. A very good afternoon to all of you. At this occasion, which is the 11th NCHE public lecture, I extend our heartfelt welcome to our distinguished presenters here present, our participants on behalf of the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation. Allow me to contextualize this public lecture within the mandate of the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation, which is to educate and train Namibians in order to attain our national development goals as enshrined in our national development plans and policies. This mandate of the ministry is executed by ensuring that quality higher education and training is delivered to the Namibian nation through the advancement of quality programs and credible projects at various public and private higher education institutions. The National Council for Higher Education, which is established through an act of parliament, is one of Namibia's leading institutions responsible for ensuring that quality programs are delivered to all of us here in Namibia. NCHE is also expected to promote the establishment of a coordinated higher education system and to facilitate the development of quality assurance systems and capacity in our higher education sector. In an interconnected world as we are today, it is critical that we work with partners and sister organizations from all over the world to attain our educational aspirations. I'm therefore very delighted that NCHE is a member of both our SADC Quality Assurance Forum and bodies, as well as other international quality assurance bodies. It is through the exchange of expertise and experience that we can really enhance our quality assurance instruments here in Namibia. One critical intervention of the ministry and NCHE is the development of what we call the minimum standards for higher education, which is aiming at strengthening the implementation of existing quality assurance procedures, policies, and systems. There was first a part where we have local expertise that worked on developing a document in terms of the quality standards that we have to follow. And this was followed by a second phase in which we will engage an international expert that will refine and independently validate and authenticate these standards that were developed by our local experts. These minimum standards, once we have finalized these minimum standards, what will happen is we will have to go through an approval process that will facilitate some further discussions if need be, and there will be other clearance mechanisms that we will have to go through before we eventually implement these standards. Let me remind you that the minimum standards will help NCHE and by extension the ministry to ensure that we have access to quality education, and we enhance also our various instruments that ensure quality of our education and training at all our institutions of higher learning. Therefore, it is my conviction that the public lecture under the theme Enhancing Higher Education System Performance and Efficiency through Minimum Standards is timely and it's appropriate. Ladies and gentlemen, in embracing our technologies, I'm informed that these proceedings are broadcast on Zoom platforms to enable a wider audience to attend and to participate in this discussion. I would therefore like to express my appreciation to all stakeholders, partners, sister organizations and agencies locally and both internationally. They joined us here this evening. Your participation and inputs are highly valued. Let us use this opportunity to exchange innovative ideas in the field of quality assurance in higher education, and also ideas on how to sharpen the quality assurance tools that we already have implemented here in Namibia. I particularly think about strengthening coordination between the various institutions and strengthening our communication systems so that there's clarity in terms of what we are doing. We need to also ensure that we package our materials in such a way that it is understandable by the different categories of our society. Sometimes packaging these issues in a very academic way doesn't actually help in terms of understanding, and therefore it is critical that we do it in different ways so that, and use the social media that we have, the power of social media to spread the message. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I'm just here to say welcome to this public lecture, and please participate. This is a very important exercise that we have to finalize. Most certainly we'd like to see a final result within this year as a ministry, and I wish you successful and impactful engagements on this very important lecture and topic. So thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for the Executive Director. Next, we'd like to call the Chairperson of the NCHE, that is Professor Samuel John, who's an experienced academic with management experience as the head of mechanical engineering, Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, with a demonstrated history of working in the higher education industry. Ladies and gentlemen, your Chairperson. Please give him a round of applause.
the Executive Director, Minister of Higher Education, Training and Innovation, Dr. Alfred Van Ken, the Deputy ED, Dr. Nanda. I would like to just stand on the protocol that have been established. I'm sure we have the press, we have fellow colleagues in education, especially higher education. I can see our colleagues from NQA and NTA, so I think the regulatory bodies are all here, and also the colleagues online. I would like to all greet you this evening. I stand here to address you on this occasion of the NCHE 11th Public Lecture Team, Enhancing Higher Education System Performance and Efficiency Through Minimum Standard. Emphasis is on minimum standard. It is a known fact that effective and quality higher education is fundamental in generating a professional and competent workforce with globally equivalent competencies that are critical for the country to prosper and compete in the international arena. There is a Japanese saying that you cannot manage what you can't measure. And so the minimum standard is to be able to provide, if you like, some yardstick against which we can then measure where we are in terms of quality assurance. The ever-increasing diversity in higher education providers and students demand system instruments for assuring quality, alignment, and coordination. Minimum standards set baseline requirements for all types of higher education providers in the system to promote inclusive and enhance equal access to quality education, while at the same time ensuring integrity and trust in higher education performance locally, regionally, and globally. At the international level, the International Network for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, which I hear the fraternity in higher education always call it INQAAHE, adopted international standards and guidelines for quality assurance in tertiary education, which is ISGs. The ISGs embrace the diversity in tertiary education and empower the enhancement capacity of quality providers in their quest for diversification, efficiency, relevance, and transformative power. At the continental level, the African standards and guidelines for quality assurance in higher education were developed as part of the Pan-African Quality Assurance and Accreditation Framework to provide a continental framework that harmonizes higher education quality assurance systems and promotes compatible methodologies. The ASGs, as they are called, are common minimum standards or requirements. They aim to support higher education institutions and quality assurance agencies in developing adequate internal and external quality assurance systems and practices that correspond to good international practices. Ladies and gentlemen, the Namibian higher education system and its quality assurance have come to a junction of maturity that requires a more proactive role from quality assurance provisions in promoting inclusion, equity, relevance, and equal access to quality education. Therefore, the need for us as a country to engage in discussion of minimum standards for higher education. It is worth noting that by their nature, minimum standards indicate only the bare minimums that institutions should put in place to meet the basic quality standard. Dr. Susanna Karakhanyan, I hope I pronounced your surname very well, Karakhanyan, is an expert in quality assurance, and she will deliver this year's lecture. She has visited Namibia on previous occasions and is with us in person today, and I would like to welcome you to Namibia Please feel at home. This is the land of the brave. There are so many things to see around. And so we're very happy to have you in our midst and for taking up this responsibility. After the briefing we had with you with the board, I think I can be speaking on behalf of the whole board that we are quite satisfied that we have the best person for this job. And I believe that our country can only benefit from your knowledge that you've acquired all over the years. I have actually listened to you. I have been at the conference, INQAAHE, and I think it's a great job that is being done. For the first time, I got to understand the different dynamics in various countries with regards to quality assurance at the INQAAHE. It really was an eye-opener for me. So please, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to this year's lecture, and I hope that at the end, we'll all leave with something. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank the chairperson again of the NCHE. Ladies and gentlemen, please show there are people here tonight for the ones online. Yes, we are here in numbers. We are here to talk about higher education and how that's going to change the future of our nation. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you are here not to hear me make jokes and speak about how serious the issue is, but now we'd like to then warmly welcome our speaker of the night. Let me quickly just tell you who you have the privilege to be listening to here tonight. Dr. Susanna Karakhanyan, she is born Armenian, but she lives in the United Arab Emirates. Currently, Dr. Karakhanyan is employed by the Abu Dhabi government as Higher Education Policy and Regulation Director at the Abu Dhabi Department of Education and Knowledge in the United Arab Emirates. She is the former president of the International Network of Quality Assurance Agencies in Higher Education, which is a global umbrella of networks of tertiary education quality assurance providers, which brings together more than 350 members worldwide. She consults governments on policy making, governance, as well as external and internal quality assurance in a diversity of contexts globally. I'm not done. Yeah? People have worked many years, man. So we must take the time to understand. There are also young people around who want to have these aspirations. And so let's keep it going. I'm going to just conclude. Dr. Karakhanyan holds a MS Ed in Educational Administrative Leadership from the University of Pennsylvania and a PhD in Social Sciences from Radboud Universiteit in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. Her research interests focus around higher education governance and administration, reforms, policy making, policy diffusion and transfer, and external and internal quality assurance. Her research background has helped tremendously in the establishment of new and evaluation review of existing tertiary education systems in a diversity of contexts. Ladies and gentlemen, please, drum roll. Give a warm round to Dr. Susanna Karakhanyan.
Thank you very much. This is really very encouraging, and you set the tone, and we'll move on the tone. Thanks a lot. Great job. Well, let me start by welcoming Dr. Alfred van Kent. Thank you very much for coming. Dr. Nanda, very much welcome here. Chairperson, Dr. Samuel, Professor Samuel John. Sorry about this. Deputy Chairperson, Dr. Francine, Mr. Shipena, and Ms. Demas. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, welcome, and thank you very much for coming. Today we're going to have some sort of interaction, and I would love you to be active. Anytime you think you want to stop me, and let's talk. But the whole purpose for today's meeting, and if we could put my slides over there. again, was to concentrate on the minimum standards, as we have said, the methods of measurement, the multiple measurement methods that are over there and we're planning to introduce to the system. But before going deep into these minimum standards, I would like to give you some context of the global trends, what's going on out there, what is happening. And you all know, you all are in the field, you are all the stakeholders, you all know that things have changed drastically. But let's summarize where we are, put the context, and then we delve deeper into the content and context of Namibia. So let's look at this. I have to, okay, sorry, I have to share my screen for the audience. But I am not even connected. I don't have the link. Okay, sorry. Let me go ahead. Okay, so let's have a look at, this is in 1970s, like 50 years ago, before, well, close to my date birth, and this is 2020s. Do we see a big difference there? Do we? No, no big difference. But what is going on globally? There is a huge learning paradigm shift out there. We all witness the learning paradigm changing and learning, especially learning in higher education or tertiary education, going beyond formal higher education. We see rise of informal, non-formal education, but what we as educationalists do for that. So let's see how the students are learning now. We have students now learn from not only one source. Now there are diversity of sources there. There is no limitation to the age of learning. There is no limitation of modality of learning. There is no limitation of means of learning or technology of learning. So it's a huge diversity in the age of diversity and disruption that we're living. We see technology coming in. We see the technology creating a cheating tool, and then also as ChatGPT. And when we see detect ChatGPT, a tool being created to actually detect the cheating. So, and we will see it more and more coming. There is tons of developments out there, and we will see it coming more and more. So change is constant, transformation is constant. And we are currently in the field of, in the era of major paradigm shift. And let's see what the research says now about this paradigm shift. Well, more and more, the more I read research, the more I read literature, the more I get the expressions, findings like this. As per recent findings by a Harvard professor, due to the learning paradigm shift, it's evidence that the students learn 50% less from the formal curriculum offered by the university than they did 50 years ago. That is why I showed you the two eras, like 50 years apart. Same settings, and now they're learning 50% less. There is a new tool which measures the value added of the program or the learning gain of the student, which is the measurement like what student after completing the program, after achieving the learning outcomes, what is the gain from the program? Meaning that there are multiple factors influencing the learning, but we want to understand the relevance and learning gain from the program. So the OECD and the Council of Advanced Education in the US and OECD jointly developed a tool where there is a measurement of this learning gain actually. And across 15 countries, developed countries, they have done the testing, and it turns out that the test scores came like entering and exiting students demonstrated insignificant learning gain in transferable skills. So this type of literature, this type of research sends us very clear signals that we're doing something wrong. We're not there yet. We're not catching up with the progress. We're not catching up with what is going on there and globally, and we are losing the ground now. So let me briefly introduce the study I did for UNESCO. And this study was actually presented in the World Higher Education Conference, which took place in Barcelona 2022, last year in May. And I worked out of the 10 themes in that conference, theme number 4, quality and relevance of programs, was led by me. So just 2 slides presenting the findings from that study, which was a global study we have done. So I am a historian by my first profession, and I like to look at the history, because this is where you bring all the different particles together, making the puzzle a picture out of a puzzle. So throughout the education evolution, there have been 3 major technological disruptions into education. The first disruption was Tech Revolution 1, introduction of alphabet, 10th century. The education starts already through the letters are being introduced. Second tech revolution, mass production of books and introduction of books to education, 16th century. And that was a major disruption as a technology of learning that entered the system. And then now we are witnessing Tech Revolution 3, which is introduction of ICT in education. Whereas throughout those 2 stages we adapted, and we are now actually in Tech Revolution 2, basically. But in Tech Revolution 3, it seems like we're lagging a bit. So in the Middle Ages, what was the currency education? Why would a student pay? They pay to get knowledge, to get information, because information didn't exist available. It was not available out there. So the currency of education was information. Now, in which era are we? Come on, which era are we in? Information era, which means that currency of education is no longer information. They're not coming to us to get the information, they're coming to us to get the skills, to get the analytical skills, critical skills. Since they are dealing with diverse context out there, diverse learning sources, factors influencing their learning, they want to distill what is the truth, how to navigate, how to build the learning pathway, how to build their career. So these are the things that we have to keep in mind when we make the changes or introduce any standards to any type of system. But it's not the only change. There is a huge diversification that is happening in higher education. And as I have mentioned earlier, it's not only formal education that matters now. Higher education goes beyond formal education, informal and non-formal education. Well, this is the classic thing we are all familiar with, bachelor, master, doctoral, in the formal education. And recent years, the higher education institutions have been able to adjust their approaches, and you would see introduction of short learning programs, pre-masters, post-master programs. There are a lot of developments out there because they see the need. The students, well, at the age of 17, 18, it's not easy to make a good choice for the career. After bachelor degree, I might want to change my profession, but not all the systems allow it. So in the Dutch system and the Nordic systems, they are introducing these pre-masters, post-masters, so that you could change the orientation and adjust to your career of, passion. If you don't love whatever you do, if you're not passionate about what you do not contribute, actually. So this is the key here. Apart from formal, we also see expansion of alternative education. And this alternative education is like all we know, like micro-credentials, we call it now. Well, they are smaller courses, smaller credentials, which would allow accumulation, top up, and then carry over, so that you could carry it towards a qualification. Work while you study creates opportunities for learning. This is inclusion. This is access to quality education. But look what we have now. We don't have tools to measure this quality. Alternative education is not measured anywhere. There is no quality assurance tool for that. Actually, there was no one before 2022 when INQAAHE came with the standards which also covers the micro-credentials. But at this point of time, it's only the micro-credentials coming from higher education institutions that are being quality assured. How about Coursera? How about Google? How about Amazon? They're offering so many courses, micro-credentials themselves, but these are not quality assured. But people are getting in, the market for micro-credentials is rapidly growing. So we have here rapidly increasing demand for flexible learning pathways. Each student has an individual pathway to go. All of them are different, and all of them have to have an opportunity to build their own learning pathway, exit the system, and come back whenever they wish so, or learn and study, work and study at the same time. We have to create those opportunities, and we have to catch up with the things that we're missing. When we looked in the study, so what prevents from relevance of the programs, relevance of higher education currently, formal higher education, not one factor was there. I mean, there were multiple factors, and the factors are multifaceted. Curriculum, we all talk about student-centered education. How many of you are talking about it? Student-centered education. All of us. This is the key theme. But what we do? Time-based curriculum. Everybody needs to be there for 4 years, 2 years, and then, we measure by time, not by the skill. What if I am talented and I want to graduate within 2 years? What if I am not talented, I need more time to graduate? So, but I have my own talents, and I want to develop on my own talents. So these are the things that are actually lacking in today's curriculum, and they are predominantly theory dominated, and which is not adequate at this point. Faculty, there is no special training for faculty. We all know, sorry, I'm using the term faculty, but whenever I say faculty, just in your language, this will be academic staff. So academic staff, they don't get any special training. Especially our representatives in the study from Africa, they highlighted that we're just taken to the classes, to the classrooms, without any special preparation on what is it, but there is a huge methodology that underlines the delivery of higher education. So this thing is lacking. We have inadequate compensation and incentives policy. The promotion and valuation only based on research. The mere teaching is being neglected and limited industry exposure. We have regulators issues as well. No clarity in the expectations from higher education. Tertiary learning not priority on government agenda. This is the finding globally. This is what everybody else are talking, diverse stakeholders. Regulations prevent industry meaningful engagement and infringe academic freedom and autonomy, which I will cover a bit in a bit while. Higher educations are also experiencing issues there and creating issues themselves. Non-adequate capacity to face the challenges, insufficient investment in programs. You go to the universities to evaluate the programs and what is the recent review of the programs they have done to update the learning outcomes, the learning methodologies. You would see majority of programs haven't been even touched for 20 years. Where are we now? Industry professional associations, there is a major outcry coming globally that the professional associations all are caring about the profession but not the professional standards. So this is something also was very outstanding there. And also education systems in general. If you look at the education systems, there is a directive, we introduce a change, there is something, we make changes happen, we put the patches here and there, we're patching everything to close the gaps, and we end up having Frankenstein's monster effect. So this is what we're building for ourselves. So what is happening, and it's a global issue. It's a global issue, and countries are currently with this old paradigm, learning paradigm shift, countries now are moving on to revising overall the approach to higher education, approach to the legal and regulatory frameworks, adjusting quality assurance, coming up with diverse measurement methods, and so on and so forth. We will talk more about that later on. But now the countries are revising their approaches to catch up with the developments in the higher learning. We talked about academic freedom and autonomy, and I would like to touch on this specific topic. You would say, why are you talking about these core values of higher education? But they're directly linked. Every time you introduce some sort of standard, the universities will like, oh my God, you're touching on my academic freedom? You're touching on my autonomy? Come on, that's not acceptable. So let's differentiate, first of all, what is what, because this is really critical to understand. So let me briefly show you what is going on globally. The academic freedom, autonomy, and core values of education were first introduced through Magna Carta, which was signed in Bologna by 388 rectors. Now about 900 universities are part of it. Yeah, so, and it just highlights academic freedom, but there is no specific definition for that. Another one is Scholars at Risk. It's an NGO that works for, protecting the scholars. They have come up with core values of higher education as equitable access, accountability, institutional autonomy, academic freedom, and social responsibility, based on their studies they have done of various UNESCO documents and OECD documents. UNESCO came last year with the Futures of Education, and where it highlights empathy, equality, respect, solidarity as core values for higher education in the future. So as you see, there is no unified framework or universal definition for academic freedom and autonomy. Hence, it makes it imperative, it's absolutely important for the country itself to adopt all those core values of higher education, define the core values of higher education so that those are promoted the way they are defined in the higher education system through the curriculum, through the research of the scholars. But again, that's all said good. If we go back to the autonomy and talking about autonomy, autonomy only takes to the anarchy. I have revised many systems where the law introduces autonomy in terms of organizational, financial, academic, staffing matters. There are different definitions there. Well, what is autonomy? And then they fail to link it to accountability. Every time you introduce an element of autonomy, you have to balance it to accountability. So this balance needs to be preserved, because this is where the system, it takes to the system trust and credibility. Unless you do that, there will be always a problem. There will be abuse of those core values. There will be misuse in different settings. So there should be this balance identified. And accountability is clear. Who is paying for your services? The government, the parents, the students. Wherever the source comes from, you have to be accountable. And you have to be, in the first place, accountable to the society at large, because you are serving the society. This is your mission, to serve the society. So this is something that we need to consider when we look at the minimum standards we're introducing. These perspectives are paramount to consider when we start, judgment and discussion around it. I also would like to take you to the key terminologies that we are using in the minimum standards, and those key terminologies and key principles that we have developed come from soft regulations and the documents that the countries have adopted. So in the first place, the very hard regulation is the Towards Education for All for Namibia. And it clearly specifies access, equity, quality, and democracy. These are the key core values there. And then when you look at the goal 4 for SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, it clearly says inclusive, and please be careful here, equitable, quality education. It doesn't say access to education, any type of education. It says quality education, which means that we bear responsibility of offering equitable quality education to our young generation, to our population. They deserve it. And we need to all work together to make sure that we ensure it. Without those minimum standards, it becomes absolutely impossible to ensure that there is equitable and access to quality education. Let's move forward, because why do we teach what is the biggest service we are giving to our students? The qualification, the award of the qualification, right? So we're giving the qualification, and what is the use of that qualification? When it becomes useful, when it is recognized, right? If it is not recognized by other education providers, by market, beyond the borders, if it is not recognized, then absolutely there is no value in that qualification. Why would I pay for that, right? So there should be some recognition for that. And for recognition purposes, there are two major documents out there. The regional recognition convention, and for Africa, it's the Addis Convention. And we all need to, in Africa, it's already an active document. It's in effect. 13 countries already signed it. And I want to see Namibia also signing this. Because once you sign this regional convention, you start establishing mechanisms that promote recognition of qualification locally, regionally, and globally. So you are entering into the network of recognition, which helps you support the students. Another document here is the Global Convention. And the Global Convention was adopted in 2020, and it became, but it was ratified by 21 countries already in 2023, and March 5th, it became into effect. Now it's an active document, a hard tool based on which those countries that signed, they are establishing special mechanisms, instruments like national information centers. So they're establishing those instruments, setting up the standards for recognition of qualification. Those two regional and global conventions, they are complementary to each other. And I would love to see Namibia going in that direction and joining those conventions so that we could promote recognition further. Well, we have highlighted here like a lot of dimensions necessary for the quality assurance, for the quality education. And I would say that there is no one solution, single solution for that. Actually, there should be a suite of tools, coherent suite of tools to make it work. We have to work on the soft regulations, national policies matter, legal and regulatory framework matters, funding mechanisms matter, systemic capacity building matters, human resource capacity building matters, learning environments matter, education values matter. So we cannot expect these minimum standards to be resolving all the issues in the system. We all acknowledge that. They're all just built for a mere specific reason: performance standards, measurement of the minimum requirement to enter the higher education system and stay. This is the bare minimum that we're setting there. So now the higher educations, especially here, would say, okay, another set of standards. Isn't it enough? You are overburdening us, right? So that is something that you would say now. But let's acknowledge, if it is built in a designed and built in a way that it contributes to your issues, to the problems in the system, then this is something that is a welcome thing. So this is my favorite, quote coming from Ishikawa, who is he's called dad of quality assurance. as with many other things, there is a surprising amount of prejudice against quality control, but the proof of the pudding still is in eating. So you have to eat it to know, you have to test it, right? So this is the quality assurance that we're doing there. Now, since we're talking, we moved from the global trends to the quality assurance, I would like to talk a little bit about the global trends in quality assurance so that you also see the mechanisms that make it work. It's all like a mechanism in a watch. All is interlinked. As long as it's, works in concord, unless it works in concord, it will not be a useful thing. But let's look what's going on global. And I, again, will come a bit with the history. This is a public lecture, and we're here just to also learn what's going on there. Why do you think accreditation started ever, or quality assurance started ever? Why did they need to introduce those minimum standards or standards for quality assurance? Like it started in late 19th century in the USA. A couple of higher education institutions came together, and now they are Ivy League universities, the 8 that don't allow anybody else to enter that Ivy League, right? So they came together, and I said, no, well, we see massification. And this is the term I want you to pay attention to, massification. So if you are a boutique thing, you are producing one chocolate and everybody knows you for that chocolate, you don't need quality standards because your brand name is there. But if something massifies, there are tons of producers of chocolates, you need standards. So this is what they said, well, we're not allowing anybody to come into our system because the higher education institutions are mushrooming, the massification, the students are there, and we want to make sure whoever comes to our institution is a credible student. Whoever we take here is credible. The faculty we're hiring is credible. So they started there. In 19th century, that group of universities, so actually it started from higher education institutions. And I'm a bit sad now because throughout this modern century, external quality assurance became so much powerful that it turned into a compliance tool. But initially, it was built as an enhancement tool, a trust and credibility tool. So I would call upon all the higher education institutions, take it back. External quality assurance providers, they don't want to be the leaders in quality assurance. They want you to lead your internal quality assurance, and they will be assisting you from afar. So this is something that you have to take on board for yourself. Then it moved to the different continents. In 1930s, it appeared in Japan. 1960s, it was in Philippines. And then in 1980s, we see a huge massification in the system. Not quality assurance, higher education massification, and massification of quality assurance providers globally. Then in 1965, what was the natural evolution, because US saw explosion of accreditors there. Actually, US is one of the countries which has majority of the accreditors now. So they saw explosion of accreditors and decided, no, we have to have, evaluation of evaluators needs to happen. Now they moved on to another level, evaluation of evaluators. Now, if the accreditors in the US are not evaluated by another organization, now US Department of State and NCHE, if they are not recognized by them, then those accreditors, if they function in the system, their institutions will not get funding, government funds. So it's linked to the government funding. So they are actually made to be evaluated externally. And also this evaluation of accreditors promotes mutual recognition. So if you see that, well, okay, this evaluator, this quality assurance provider is evaluated, then I can trust him. So we can mutually start our collaborations. And then in 1991, this was when the first global network was established, because it was not only in separate continents, already we saw expansion globally of quality assurance providers. Due to this expansion, the first network that appeared globally was the International Network of Quality Assurance Agencies in Higher Education, of which I'm a proud member of, and we have two proud members here too, NCHE, and we have NQAAHE, who are the proud members of INQAAHE. And this is the global organization that has 350 plus accreditors as its quality assurance providers as its membership. And we're really proud to have this global outreach and be able to support them. So the first network that was established and started the evaluation of evaluators was globally was INQAAHE. And actually it's the only one at this point globally. But what happened regionally, you would see expansion of regional networks. We started to see, in Africa, you would see African, SACAN, in the Arab countries, Arab network in Europe, European network, CANCADE Caribbean, RIASES in Latin America and Caribbean, NCHE in the US. So we see expansion of those regional networks there. And those regional networks have their own mission to address the regional requirements that come for quality assurance, as well as evaluation of evaluators. Briefly about evaluation and evaluators, and then we're gradually moving to the minimum standards. So this is a global study that we have conducted as INQAAHE, and this was the first global study that was done in external and internal quality assurance. And you would see here the number of quality assurance bodies broken by the countries, number of countries. So in the first column, set of columns, you would see the number of countries. And then in the second one, number of quality assurance bodies. And you see that Europe and North America are leading, of course. And then in the third one, you see membership with networks. So it seems like more or less they are all members of the networks. But look at the final chart, evaluation of evaluators. So it's only in Europe and US that like 90% of accreditors are externally evaluated. This is a requirement. It's called voluntary procedure, but it's mandatory. In quality assurance, actually, when we say should, we mean you must. So this is how it happens there too. So they must do it. But if you look at other regions, you would see here and there it evolving. And recently in Latin America and Caribbean, majority of the governments moved on mandatory, evaluation of evaluators. So they are already turning to INQAAHE to do these evaluations because INQAAHE is the only organization that does it internationally. So now let's talk about, go back to this small circle that minimum standard is trying to target, and that was the performance standards. Like in the whole ecosystem of instruments necessary to address the educational developments, we highlighted that we're only working on a small element, which is the standards, minimum standards. But what is the wider mission? And we have been talking about it already throughout all this, speech. Again and again, the wider mission is equal access to quality education. And I will come up with figures now. You will see why we are highlighting this quality education and equal access to it. The core for us has been, when we were developing the standards, the core for us was safeguarding the students. Students is all that matters, nothing else. If we cannot safeguard them, if we cannot provide them with the education that matters, then we should not be limiting their opportunities going outside and pursuing their future. So we have to make sure that we safeguard the students, and hence what we laid as a baseline for the minimum standards is safeguarding the students, making sure they get the bare minimum to succeed. Next principle, key, is the trust and credibility in the system. So when do you stop trusting in a system? When you see double standards, when you see discrimination in treatment, it's already not a good, indicator, right? So having in a system, and one of the terms I mentioned at the very beginning of my speech was diversification. Namibian higher education has diversified throughout its 40 years of development, 40 plus. And now we see public, private, cross-border providers, virtual, online, everybody. So we see it like huge diversification. If we develop standards separately for public and standards separately for private, that is not, we are not doing good to the system. And your constitution actually highlights clearly that private institutions can enter the market provided they are providing equal education, equivalent education to public sector. So these were the key words that we took to put in the baseline of the minimum standards. So these were the underground principles, and underpinning principles. Another major thing that we considered is recognition of qualification, and I have talked already how important that is. And last but not least, we also looked at the international comparability and competitiveness. In the long run, what we want to see, a gradual enhancement, comparability, competitiveness, and international visibility of the Namibian education. And that is why we also did some comparative analysis and started set the minimum standards to more or less keep up with that. But when you develop standards, developing a standard, as I have said, well, you can come up with, standards that are ruining systems. You can come up with standards that are building on systems. So building standards, designing standards is actually an art. Everything we do is an art. It's sort of art. But I would highlight that standards are also an art. So let's see how it goes. Well, you can end up having this, as we saw globally in many systems, this surfaced. You can end up with having system that patches things here and there and comes up with something that might not even work or collapse at some point. Or you might design something elegant like this. So it's also an art, right? So this is the Dubai Museum of the Future. You enter there and it shows what the life will be like in 2071 for the 100th anniversary of the country. So this is really an amazing thing to see. But the structure, construction itself, it's elegant. And it's all coherently done. So I'm using the terms elegant, coherently done, and compatible with each other. Now we go to the standards and we build standards. So we can come up with one standard, one size fit all. And then we say, how come? We're all different. I am private, you're public, I am for-profit, you are non-for-profit, I am cross-border, I am university, you are college, I am institute, you are academy. We're also different. How come the standards are the same? And never ever one size fits all. Throughout my experience, I evaluated quality assurance systems in many countries, and one size standard fitting all, well, I would understand that at the very beginning of the emergence of the quality assurance system, that might be okay. But once system maturates to the extent that it needs to come up with embrace the diversity. Embrace the diversity because it's there, it's here, it will be here, and we will have to deal with this ever-increasing diversification. Hence, one set of standards doesn't fit all. We considered that in our design as well. What else we considered in our design? So there is a standard, don't do bad things, right? So don't you think it's too vague, too broad, and leaves a lot of room for rationalization, right? So too broad, challenging to measure. So if you get a standard which is really too broad, I mean, okay, that sets like a direction, but how do I measure? I have 100 plus universities, I don't know how to measure it because it doesn't tell me anything. Just don't do bad things. And then we come up with 10 commandments, which specifies clearly, don't kill, don't lie, it's already, the bad things are specified, right? So for our standards to be really specific and measurable, they have to be smart in design. They have to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time frame has to be also considered. So these are all the things, the ideas that we have invested into those minimum standards. And again, we're all talking about the standards, but standards, or blaming the standards, or having a prejudice towards standards, but standards are not bad. For example, you all talk diverse languages. My native language is Armenian. I talk Russian. I talk many other languages, but if I hadn't talked English, would we be able to communicate? No, if you hadn't talked English, we all wouldn't be able to communicate, right? So there should be some common understanding, some universal language that helps us understand each other, helps the Namibian quality assurance to be recognized by others, helps the higher education system in Namibia to be easily readable and interpretable for other contexts. Likewise, the other systems to be really interpretable for you. So that is why we have national qualifications framework there. That is why we have quality assurance. And universal standards are crucial to promote recognition, portability, and transferability of credentials. That's a must. But again, the whole thing is in the design. You can design standards, universal standards that ruin, and universal standards that build. And the most important thing is you have to keep the right balance. Higher education providers need to have enough autonomy to perform their mission at expected level of quality. Of course, balanced with respective accountability. If there is no accountability structures put into the system, then you could expect a lot of interference from the regulators into the direct operation of the institution. Once you set up the accountability structures and you provide the autonomy, you start steering from afar. You are not interfering, but you are guiding them. So this is the accountability, this is the balance we have to keep. So if we have an overlook of what is going on globally, you would see that there are multiple measurement methods globally that exist in quality assurance. It's not only like the 16 or 12 standards that for quality assurance everybody comes up with, but there are diverse measurement methods, and they all serve different purposes. At the entry point, the requirements should be totally different from those ones who are already in full operation and are cyclically reviewed. So that is why at the entry point, you would see in many countries having the minimum standards, the bare minimum. Well, for example, you have to have at least 4 faculty per program if you want to establish a new program. I'm just saying out of, blue, just some example, but these are bare minimum requirements. We want to make sure the student getting into the program actually has the right faculty to teach. So they said the minimum requirement, this is absolutely necessary to have. You don't want to end up having 300 students being taught by one professor in all the subject matters. That's not the quality education we're striving for. So this is something that we laid into the grounds of the standards. And if you look at once the institution gets established, then during the full-fledged performance, you see institutional licensing, program accreditation. In some systems, advanced systems like UK, Australia, and many other countries, advanced countries, you would see self-accreditation of programs. So higher education institutions, they are only accredited by the regulator as an institution, which grants them the right to do accreditation of their own programs. So the universities would be doing self-accreditation of their programs, and there are specific procedures for that. We have professional accreditors who come in to measure the professional standards, like the medical WFME accreditors are there. There is EBIT engineering accreditation. which are actually concentrating not on the institutional performance. They don't care much about it. What they care about is the learning outcomes and the relevance to the market needs. We have risk-based review. For example, in UK, they used to have an audit of the universities, which they actually stopped this March. They no longer do audit of higher education institutions. What they have introduced is risk-based review, because after multiple cycles, they decided, okay, it becomes into a, a routine and is not of much use. Why don't we set up risk-based review? We set up indicators at the system level, like teaching indicators, research indicators, and safeguarding students' finances. So we are setting up their indicators, and then annually we collect data from the institutions. Once we detect a risk, then we go and evaluate. So many systems are already moving on to the risk-based reviews after a couple of cycles of institutional reviews. There are accreditation of short learning programs, and of course we know about the rankings and ratings. I'm not saying that they are ideal tools, but these are multiple measurement tools, and they're all built to complement and supplement each other. Once you have in a system diverse regulators using more or less the same standards, then you start overburdening the system, the higher education institutions. They get into the accreditation fatigue. But once those diverse tools complement and supplement each other, you are actually building up on the system. So in terms of the rankings, I will be making some references when we talk about the minimum standards, but we all acknowledge that rankings have their own issues. But there is first of all, there are 60,000 universities globally, and only about 2,000 participate in ranking. So we do not have a clear picture. The ranking doesn't give a clear picture of the institutional life, right? This is one of the indicators. And plus, it's English biased and so forth, research biased. So we're just leaving it there, but we will be making references here and there. Sometimes it's good to look at how are they actually measuring research, for example. How are they measuring sustainable development goals, for example? So diverse measurement methods are really good. Now let's move on to the Namibia. I have been gradually introducing what we are doing with the minimum standards, but now I want to say why we are doing this. Why? So as you have been informed, there have been 2 phases of development. And the second phase actually concentrated on, as you have seen, we have done analysis at the international soft regulation level. We have done the legal and regulatory framework analysis in the country. We also looked at the institutional level, and we also looked at the programs that are the figures, mere figures. What do the figures tell us? Well, you would see that higher education system is characterized by the steady growth, again, massification and diversification. I'm coming back to the terms I used at the very beginning because these are the key. So why it happens? Why do we need it? Because we already have these conditions are ripe. They're all there. You have massification, you have diversification, you need a measurement tool. You need something to protect the students. You need something to safeguard the system. So that is why this is paramount. This is really critical at the stage of development of higher education in Namibia. So you would see that the growth is massive, and the private sector is also growing equally. And so you see the enrollment, of course, enrollment in public institutions is much higher, but what does this figure also tell you? There is growth, there is demand, and if in the next slide I show you number of programs which have enrollment of 1 student, that will already tell you the whole story. That maybe we're not doing well if there is a huge demand, but there are programs which have 1 student enrollment. So let's go to the figures at the institutional and program level. We have 69,000 plus students, 18 higher education institutions, 3 public higher education institutions, and 3 higher education institutions, 2 public and 1 private, qualify as comprehensive university because they are doing research, teaching, learning, service to society. They are offering undergraduate, graduate, doctoral programs. They are doing research, service to, they are comprehensive, and they are offering programs in more than 4 fields of learning. So that makes them a comprehensive university. Those 3 higher education institutions are covering 77% of the student population. So the 3 institutions take the huge role there. In total, we have 672 programs, and out of 672 programs, we have 190 programs, which is 28%, that have less than 10 students enrolled. Now, let me interpret what that means. Me, as an evaluator, I come to a system and I see that figure. How do I interpret it? 10 per, like less than 10 students. One program, let's say one program takes at least 4 years to graduate. You divide 10 by 4. You end up 2.5 in each year. For 2.5 students, are you going to, and this is, I'm talking about the programs which are 10 and less, there are multiple, about maybe 50% of this have 1 student enrolled, which means that for 4 years there is only 1 student there. So what does it mean? It means that the higher education institution definitely is not going to hire at least 4 faculty members, 4 full-time equivalent faculty members to teach that 1 student or 2 students, right? What else does it mean? It means that they are taking the faculty from relevant fields to teach in that specific qualification, and they are awarding qualification afterwards for the program which was delivered by not professionals. How do you call it? Diploma mill? This is the term that is used globally. So now let's go back to the terminology that we were using: quality education, safeguarding students. So our students entering into the system, they're paying money. Government pays money, parents pay, whoever pays, somebody pays for that education, right? And we end up having diploma mills. They are getting diploma which might not be recognized if you dig deeper into the system. So these are the issues that we considered. And plus, would it be efficient for a higher education institution to keep one program, a program that has 1 student? Would it be efficient to invest into it? No. So there are a lot of indicators for this. Either this program is not relevant, then you have to close. You have to revise it. You have to come up with the new things so that you are more attractive. As we have said, there is a massification in the system. There is a huge demand, but we end up having 190 programs with 10 and less students enrolled. So this gives a clear sign that we need these minimum standards. We need to make sure that our student entering a program is sure that he is entering with a program that provides bare minimum for quality. Agree? Our kids deserve it. The country deserves it. We all deserve it, right? So we have to come up with this, with these minimum standards. Well, as we have said, these were the key principles that laid the grounds for our minimum standards. Again, inclusiveness. We wanted to make sure that we embrace the diversity out there, diversity in the student population, diversity in provisions, diversity in the age groups, that we will embrace diversity. So we have to be an inclusive system. Equal access to quality education. Efficiency. Having 1 student in 1 program is a sign that the system is not efficient. Having 28% of programs of that kind just sends a clear sign that the system is not efficient. Efficiency was one of the principles that laid the grounds for the minimum standards. Consistency in evaluation, that all of the institutions have to abide by the same rules. We all are stakeholders in higher education, and we know that evaluation, a key principle for a validity of an evaluation system is consistency in evaluation. So if we don't have consistency, then the assessment is not valid. Accountability is the key, and transparency, of course. That was the key principle, that once you publish the standards, everybody knows the standards. That is a transparent system. This is how you are going to be evaluated. This is what is required from you. So this is something that we laid as the key principles there. And again, the purpose of the standards that we have highlighted is safeguarding the students, ensuring consistency, and please note the third purpose, supplementing and complementing the current quality assurance system. Again, I'm sorry to say that we are patching a gap here. We're not coming up with the systemic change I'm talking about, with the more comprehensive review of the system because of its maturity, right? But I'm saying that at this point, we're patching the system to resolve the safeguarding issue for the student, the security for the students, to get us ready for the bigger changes out there. But what we did with the second version of the standards, to eliminate any type of repetition or overlap that is out there in any other mechanism. That was our first step to do. Eliminate all types of overlap and repetition. So what you see in the standard is just a supplementary enhancement for the current standards to make sure that the diploma mills are not there for our kids. The standards are built across those four major dimensions. Of course, we look at the institution as the key element. We have come up with the nomenclature, typology of the institutions, who can be called a comprehensive university, what is a specialized university, what is an academy. We came up with a clear definition and bare minimum criteria for those standards for those types of institutions. We looked at the governance, because different types of higher education institutions demand different type of governance. So we put requirements for governance and administration, and we also put minimum standards for internal quality assurance. Because if the internal quality assurance, as I have mentioned, is strong, and it comes from higher education institutions, then the governance and everything else should be in place. The next key element is the program, and we looked here from the whole journey, throughout the whole journey of the of the learner. Starting from admission and enrollment, we looked at the curriculum. We set some specific minimum requirements for a curriculum, especially when we talk about, for example, student and faculty ratio. This is the basic thing. For example, how many students should be there per academic staff, right? Or, those are the bare requirements that we set there, and we have been discussing with our stakeholders on, how to adjust it to make sure that when we introduce those minimum standards, the impact on the system is minimal. We put some requirements on the academic and admin staff. We also set some progression and graduation minimum requirements for them. And also we took care of the graduates as well, of the students as well, through the records management and teach out. For example, any kind of institution, at any point of time, they have to have a plan. What happens to my students once I close down? We don't want the students to suffer. We need to have a clear plan there. How is the teach out happens? How is the phasing out happens? So those are the minimum things, bare minimum, that have to be in place to be able to operate. We the next major thing we looked at was the research and research capacity of a university. As you have seen, we have different types of higher education institutions there, and for each of the type we have research requirements. Let's go back to the World Convention on higher education, where they specify higher education 3 major missions: teaching, learning, research, service to society. If you are a higher education institutions, regardless, you are college or institute or university, comprehensive university, you have to have some sort of research. Definitely, universities maybe should be having in a bigger portion of that, but colleges also, at least they should be researching in their teaching and learning methodologies. At least they should be looking at what is going on there. If you don't water the plant, it will die out. So you have to research your field to know what you are delivering to the students. So research is our key element that we have also set bare minimum requirements there. And in terms of the infrastructure and facilities, we also looked like in terms of the requirements per space management for student and the faculty requirements there. Finances is the core. The first thing I do when I evaluate an institution, I look at the budget. The budget is the health of the organization. If you see a university with, for example, 80% plus of budget allocated towards salary and pay scale, so what do you do then? It's only teaching and learning, paying salary? Well, how about research? How about our other mission that you have out there? So we are, with these minimum standards, we make sure that from the profits that the institutions get, they put it back into research. They give it back to education, put it back into enhancement. So we also set some minimum requirements for the budget allocation, and also some minimum requirements for the student support services. So basically, in a nutshell, you see that the key components, they have been covered. Of course, yesterday at one of the institutions, one of the professors came up to me and said, well, you know what? I have counted your standards, and I counted the standards for about 14 countries, and it seems like you're not covering it all. It's like missing elements there. I said, example? Like mission statement, you are not even looking at mission statement. And I said, well, there are other tools that are looking at it. NQAAHE is looking at it, NCHE is looking at it, there are multiple tools that are looking at the mission statement. Please, again and again, let's reiterate the role of these minimum standards. They are not there to resolve all the problems of the system. They are not there to take place of other standards. They are just there to supplement and complement the existing standards. With this, I would like just to close with my favorite quote from Winston Churchill: to improve is to change. To perfect is to change often. So there is no problem, no issue in the constant change. It's just the love you have to invest into it, and the design of elegance that you have to put into it to make it work. And I would like to close by inviting you all to INQAAHE 70th Biennial Conference, which will take place in Kazakhstan, Astana. And here we are offering a very comprehensive program for the roadmap to enabling quality in tertiary education 2030, which is in response to UNESCO Roadmap for Higher Education 2030, which came out in May 2022. Now this one is the quality assurance roadmap. And there we are going to discuss flexible learning pathways, how to make it work, digitalization of teaching and learning, cross-border provisions, and core values of higher education. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to respond to any of your questions. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our guest all the way from the UAE. So I've taken all the notes to engage the next conversation. We can turn the lights on, and what we'll be doing now is opening up the discussion. We'll invite our guests to be seated here, and then we'll open up the floor after I take the privilege of asking the first question. So if we could just get the guys to move the stuff to the front, that'll be great. Thank you very much. No, that's good. Doctor, I think we're ready for the conversation. We'd like to turn the lights back on. We'd also like to thank everybody that's still joining us online. We're coming to you from Namibia. Please join us here for the first engagement. Turn your mic on. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. For me, it's around the consolidation of the value chain that you're speaking about, particularly around those 4 pillars. And on the other hand, there's this big monster of accountability that needs to take place at the student level, at the, at the stakeholders level, whether it's at the higher education. So how do you factor, because it seems like your presentation had a very systemic approach towards the minimum standards and towards assuring performance as well as accountability. But how do you factor the inertia, the human factors in its habit? We're just used to doing things like this. And if we might change them, that means that you might get my job as an evaluator because I don't know that. So how do we create space for people to say, as an evaluator, I might not know these new ways of massification or what these new phenomena that you're speaking about in the paradigm shift, but how do we create room for evaluators to keep their jobs while learning these new evaluation tools? Because sometimes that human factor could be the very reason why we feel inferior or insecure or not confident in this change management. How do we address the human factor?
Thank you for a very nice question. Actually, that was a key part of my research, and I would like to start quoting my professor from the University of Pennsylvania, and he was one of the most exciting professors I had in my life. And what he was talking is the value satisfaction. That is the principle of value satisfaction. If you don't know the values of the change agents, you cannot change them. If you don't know the values of the people sitting here, of your higher education stakeholders, you cannot change them. And that is why getting to know better, what is it that makes them comfortable in this change? That is the key. Well, most of the time, it's just a similar situation, but when we talk about the student learning, how do you make them change and learn, right? I mean, all of them are in their own, world of living, in their own mode of learning modality. Every time I deliver a workshop or training to higher education institutions or faculty members, my first question is, please raise the hands. How many research how your students learn? I don't get any response. We never look deep into how do my students learn, to design the methodology for learning, to revise my methodology. Likewise, with the key stakeholders of higher education, how many times did we ask them, what is it that makes you smile, makes you love your job? What is it? What are the incentive mechanisms? What is the value satisfaction for you?
But let me make it practical in that value satisfaction. I'm an evaluator, I'm a lecturer, I'm accountable to who? Is it to the student primarily or to the institution?
Well, accountability is different.
But this is exactly what I'm trying to talk about in terms of the reality of accountability and finding that, my performance management is under this institution, I report to my boss, and you're almost giving us a paradigm shift to say, no, you must focus on your client, where the demand comes from, and not who's supplying the qualification or the accreditation. And so why do we need that paradigm shift? Because I'm accountable, yes, but primarily to my boss and to my institution and not to my student. How do we shift that and create a balance like you spoke about?
Okay. Who pays?
Government.
Only?
NASFAF.
No, 90% here is government, I know. But government fund, where does it come from?
We wake up and it's in my account. It comes from FNB.
See? So there are some, links over there. And there are hidden links there, which we don't know. I mean, when it comes to accountability, and by the way, we're not making the paradigm shift. The paradigm happens itself. The learning paradigm, it just evolves. And it shapes as we change, all of us, as the technology advances, as the system advances. So, but when we go back to the accountability, where do you get... Why would you be accountable to the customer? So why do you do your job great? Why are you so super good in your leading the conferences? Why are you invited? Because you are providing the value satisfaction to your audience. You are making them happy. So unless we know what drives them, what makes them happy, so the accountability thing is actually key to any system balance. For example, let's say the funding comes from government, from parents, from students, from elsewhere, anywhere, it doesn't matter. But why did they give that money to you? For a purpose. Now you have to be reporting back, saying, well, this is how I'm performing. This is how I'm meeting the objectives you have set in front of me. Unless you are accountable for what you have done, then we saw systems collapse. We saw systems go into corruption. We saw systems suffer a lot due to the lack of accountability. I would bring examples of countries who set autonomy freely, and then they started suffering from anarchy in the system due to the lack of accountability. But once you set up this balance, then it all smoothly works.
Thank you. Let's open up the floor. I know there is value satisfaction in our audience here tonight. Where's the mic? Can we please roam the mic around into the room? We will take 2 questions from this side and then another 2 from this side, and then we'll engage those and then move on as we go. We have 2 hands, the gentleman at the back. Thank you very much.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Bernard. I'm from the University of Science and Technology, but representing myself as an individual.
Can you please stand up? Sorry for the interruption.
And you don't hear well, sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Bernard. I'm from the Namibia University of Science and Technology, from the NAST Foundation. I'm actually representing myself. Just a bit interested in the conversation. My question is just 2 questions. I've divided them in 2 legs. One is of the technology, when you're looking at the quality, referring to the quality assurance. The first one, before the pandemic, in my time when I was doing my degree, one have to study for a test. without anyone else. When you go to write the test, you are alone. But with technology, when you write an online test, it's much more different, whereby you are at your own disposal, alone or with a colleague or whoever it is. At times you would have people, like 3 people, you know, the moment when I open my test and the other 2 people open their test, the time is running. But when you have 2 or 3 people, you are colliding, you know, to have the answers in time and stuff, whereby it was different. So how do you test that quality of education when I get my qualification to say I've graduated? But then with technology nowadays is much more different when you compare to the past.
Thank you very much for the question.
The second question?
Okay, can we take one question per person? Because I think people have a lot of questions and time is not on our side.
Okay, I'm not going to be...
I'm going to do equal participation. Thank you very much. I will use my veto right as the moderator. Can we please move? And I'm also on gender balance. So next one, please, has to be a woman who's been wanting to ask a question. Gender balance. It was International Women's Day yesterday. We are not moving on without shifting the paradigm. Ladies, it's your time to shine. Please, even on this side, we can take one from the Zebra Stripes panel discussions. Dr. Bon? No? I just thought you were, okay. Any of the, oh, well, there we go. There's a lady right there in front of you. Thank you very much.
Do I need to stand?
Please stand up. Thank you.
On my personal capacity, I'm Fina from NAST. I want to ask, Doctor, and thank you for the well-articulated presentations. I'm trying to think, how are we not closing one loopholes and opening another big door? My question is, we're trying to safeguard the students, right? But we are also talking about access to higher education. Now, how did you balance the two in terms of your performance standards, particularly to the ones that are entering the market, and access to higher education? That balance, how did we make sure that the minimum standards are not closing the access to higher education while safeguarding the students at the end of the day?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question. We'll take another 2.
Yes. Thanks for the opportunity, moderator. My name is Kalanga Paulus. I'm the founder for Daydream Institute of Training and Skills Development, operating in Rundu, Karasbek, and Ondangwa. Reference to the competence-based education training program, which was introduced, reference based on the 2005 TVET policy for the Namibia Training Authority. And then listening to the presentation, and we are talking about quality education. I have been having a concern after I graduated, and when I came in the higher education industry, and I'm the one now leading this industry, I'm accountable in terms, I have accountability in terms of promoting quality education, quality assurance, and ensuring that there's a quality teaching and learning. But now my concern is about the learning, the end of the student. It's not about the process, the end of the student. What happens if my student is done? Where do they end? I'm not happy to see my student at home. But when we are talking about higher education, the concern we are having is about how do we promote quality higher education based on competency. If you look at the system for NCHE CBET program, it's speaking about a formula. Knowledge, the skills plus knowledge, plus application, which you get to competency. But now you have a student who's studying accounting, human resources, coming from IUM, NAST, or UNAM. When they go in the industry, you are still concerned in terms of competency. So I think, how do we, maybe to make it short, how do we align the system NCHE have introduced in terms of the CBET into the professional continuing program for higher education in terms of quality education? Okay.
Last question for this round of questions.
Thank you very much. Mine is around the rigidity. We have institutions that are just stagnated, who are not flexible in terms of admission, in terms of responding to the needs, because the curriculums must take according to them whatsoever, a lot of bureaucracy. Do you have any kind of formula or approach that one could say and tell the institution of higher learning in Namibia for them to relax whatever they are doing and make their courses flexible? Last is the issues of how do we depoliticize the issues of quality assurance, because politicians play a major role in our high institutions. That's why you find them, they are the head of various institutions under the terminology called chancellors and whatever nonsense they call themselves. How do we depoliticize this? Because this has a serious impact, and you see that those institutions that are well politically connected, they always causes good things, bursary get like this. How do we ensure that? Thank you.
Thank you very much to the public. Well, back to you, Doctor. You can start. I can remind you of where we started. We have a question around assessment here, pre-COVID, post-COVID, particularly in-class assessments versus out-class assessments. How does that work? Is the value proposition still the same?
Well, we all know that with the COVID coming on our hands like overnight and going on the lockdown, we found out, well, actually, I always say that COVID was not a problem. COVID actually helped us to reveal all our problems, surface all our problems in the system. So we're not ready. Our education system is not sustainable. It's globally. So, okay, we're talking about COVID, lockdown, everybody went home, and well, a majority of them can't have access to the internet. How about the countries where there is an electricity cut? It's not even about the internet. You have electricity cut, halas, you can't go anywhere else. You can't do online education even. So we as education system globally, none of them is ready for sustainable education. Sustainable education should be the topic of the priority topic on the agenda of all the governments. That's a must for all. When comes, well, we all know that when COVID came, none of us was prepared. None of us was prepared for that. And overnight, they started moving on to the online platform, and examinations were a major issue. And they are still a major issue. And hence, there are solutions here and there, smaller solutions. We are taking small steps. We are really very slow in education technology development. But still, there is some progress. In our minimum standards, we also set some minimum requirements for online examinations and, like proctoring, the authentication systems. There are some solutions out there. But again, it takes like a whole system to train. You have to train all of the faculty. We had a huge army of faculty, of academic staff who didn't even know how to prepare slides for the, to put it on the Zoom platform. How about that? So the Zoom platforms turned into like only a professor with the open face and everybody talking to the screen with black screen only. Everybody is closed over there. So we know that there was a problem. There were a lot of lessons we learned from COVID, and there should be developments, and there are small developments coming there. We also introduced some of the solutions, but again, it's a joint thing. We cannot come up, it's not like me or NCHE or NQAAHE coming up or minister coming up, oh, this is the solution, let's go ahead. No, it's a systemic thing. We are the stakeholders, all of us together. We all need to join our efforts. We all need to feel accountable for this, that we have something to say here. We have we have to join our efforts together. It's a joint effort, united you will stand.
So we can't assume that the system was necessarily effective before COVID, even in terms of assessment, and therefore our response must be more collective in dealing with those gaps or those bridges in building them.
Learning and researching the gaps.
Learning, researching the gaps.
Understanding how it works, the mechanics of these issues, and then building the solutions for that.
So there are gaps.
And that is why I highlight in each and every of my talk, research, research, and research.
Thank you. Let's move to the next question. Safeguard and access. How do you maintain the balance between performance and efficiency on the one hand and safeguarding students' interest on the other?
I'm really happy you asked that question because I was expecting that question actually. Again, let's go back to what we're promoting here. We are promoting access to quality education. We're not promoting access to higher education, okay? Access to quality education. And each and every kid that enters into higher education has a right to go for quality education. The minimum standards don't say you do not have a right to operate. It says you all are welcome here. We're embracing diversity of providers in there. But there is a bare minimum you have to provide for your student. This is what the minimum standard says. And you don't want to open up your system to diploma mills and just being granting diploma here and there and then ending up with a ruined system. So let's differentiate between access to quality education and the chance to get into the diploma mill, a system that actually prints out the diplomas without any award of qualification. So I think that that balance needs to be kept there.
But Doctor, what you're essentially also saying is that it's in the student's interest to go to an institution where there's quality, where performance, efficiency, and all of the other inputs that you're talking about are highly considered and prioritized, that they're actually mutually inclusive as a concept that the demand works with the quality of the supply.
Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. Like look at the number of programs you have. 190 programs having less than 10 students. It doesn't talk about access. If there was an access, those programs would be filled in with like 100 plus students. They wouldn't be targeted as a major risk area for the system.
Okay.
So these are the things that you need to consider. So there is a difference. And we are not limiting any access with these standards to the education system. If you are providing the bare minimum, you are welcome there. If you are relevant, you are welcome there. And my colleague also raised the issue of relevance of the programs and the links to the market needs. You have to be relevant. You are not going to just provide something that the student takes and can't even get employed. So these are the issues we need to consider. The students are paying, the government is paying, whoever is paying, it doesn't matter, but they want to get the credential that works.
Synergies with technical and vocational education training. You also spoke about the great expansion in the formal space between the short courses, pre-masters, post-masters, and kind of a greater spectrum in terms of the supply from the institutions of higher learning. But you primarily spoke about quality. And the question is here, the synergy to TVET. Why is it important to have those synergies, or is it not important to have them?
Absolutely important. So there should be like the alignment, horizontal and vertical alignment across the education system is a must. What we see here, students graduating from secondary school, high school, going to university, and then not getting there, not being able to survive, right? In the higher education. So we see a major gap. That is why I'm saying that, well, if you look at the qualifications frameworks of, I'm not talking specifically about Namibian, but globally, you would see there are things that need to be fixed to make sure that the flexible learning pathways work.
What does that mean, flexible? Let's move into the next question because it talks about flexibility. This flexibility you spoke about becoming too broad. How do you maintain something that is flexible but is still controllable and that's not too open to anything and ensures quality?
The flexible learning pathways are there to enable the students to have an exit from the formal education at any time of education with the credentials that he has gained at that point. And then using those credentials, if you want to come back, build up on it rather than go to zero one, to the square one.
So if I go
and
to
start.
NAST, for instance, and I'll go to a technical vocational training, would there be a flexible pathway? Is it currently in the system or is it not?
That should be. This is the whole idea of the flexible learning pathways, that you, at any point of time, you have to allow the student to taste his own learning pathway. What is it that he wants to pursue? Maybe I get into higher education, then I say, oh my God, I want to go to vocational track and I want to try that, or vice versa. Or I want to taste the waters here and there and see which one works for me better. So there should be an opportunity for that. And the student completing with an assessed course has to be able to take that credential, the micro-credential, evaluated credential, as a credential for himself to build up, to top up, and to make it a portable for other qualifications or for the job market.
Depoliticization of higher education.
That's a very sensitive issue. Can you tell me an aspect of our life which is not politicized? Name one. Name one. But let me tell you one thing. In the sectors, in the fields, where you see the unity, where you see the stakeholder engagement, where you see that people have stake in it and they want to jointly to, they are all working in concord, politics steps back. Once you give the floor, the politics will come in. Quality assurance has become a political tool in many contexts, in many countries. They are just using that tool for decision making on and everything else. So that's really one of the issues of it. But why? Tell me, anybody, any reason why the politicians want to take, or the government wants to have, to have that tool in hand? Trust and credibility. Build the trust in your provisions, make a credible system. The government will be happy to step back and actually do other important things.
So just a quick one to trust and credibility. So who has the power, or where does the power lie to shift the system into this particular paradigm where accountability becomes mainstreamed?
Well, about the trust and credibility, it's not, as I have said, nothing happens in isolation. Nothing works in isolation. It's all ecosystem. There are diverse factors out there, diverse ingredients engaged in this, trust and credibility, building trust and credibility, starting from transparency, engagement, and all the other aspects that are out there. The whole thing here is that how to mobilize the key stakeholders to build that culture that takes us to trust and credibility. This is the key. For me, in any system, in any situation, in any institution I go or work, or any company or any staff member I work with, they should be active engagement. Active engagement, having a stake in it. If you care for it, you will do it. If you don't care, if you are not engaged, you don't care. So engagement is the key. And that is why NCHE, I would like to commend them for this really very strong, engagement step they have taken. We have been going through the stakeholders, talking with everybody. Now we are requesting your written feedback to the minimum standards so that it works for you. Because if you have a stake in it, that will be useful for you. You don't want any tool to come and work as a hammer on you. Then if you invest into it, you become part of it, then this becomes your tool. This becomes the enhancement tool.
Thank you very much. There was a self-appointed timekeeper there. Thanks for that alarm. 8 o'clock it is. We're a little bit over time, but we'll take 2 more questions from the floor. Okay, we'll take the last 3 questions on that side that are up. Okay, can we have them?
All males.
All males.
Oh, thank
Is this natural selection or?
Females.
Okay, no. Okay, there we go.
Thank you very much,
Professor Gangira, please.
moderator. Thank you very much, presenter. Very exciting topic. You talked about typology of institutions. My question is, and you also talked about the role research plays in teaching. I want to find out from you whether research-intensive universities or institutions of higher education have a better quality of education than the ordinary university or college. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't think that a research-intensive university is necessarily a very good teaching and learning institution, or only teaching and learning institution is a poor learning institution. No. Everything is relative. You cannot make judgment on specific cases, but each case is specific, so you have to look at the specific case. But what I know for sure, if you don't research in the subject that you actually own, it dies out. It becomes obsolete. Research is taking us to the truth, taking us to the development, taking us to the, to keeping the pace with the trends with our development, with how this globe evolves. So if you don't have research embedded in your activities, then why are you called higher education institution in the first place, right? Name it school, be like another tutorial or whatever. That's all perfectly fine. If you are able to tutor students and they are doing a great job, that's perfectly fine. That's not inferior. I would say that all types of institutions, they have all their own mission. And if they perform to the standards, if they actually serve the students' needs, then the system is actually doing something right. But if we see like just names out there, we're calling it a university, but having one or 10 students or 70 students, actually we have here in the system 7 universities that have less than 70 students engaged. Then if you take it to the student and faculty ratio, like 1 to 25, like 1 faculty or 2 faculty in the university, how do you call that a university? Where is research? How is it possible with those 2 faculty to do everything else? So, well, there are, as I have said, what we are introducing is the bare minimum requirements there.
Thank you. We'll take 2 more. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. My name is Franz. I hope the colleagues at the National Council for Higher Education, they have taken you to Kapana, single court, so they can welcome you. So the question I want to find out, since maybe borrowing really an international perspective on this point around massification and democratization of education. I'm really trying to bring this. You have put sufficient emphasis on the question around this bare minimum requirement or standard. I'm saying this, generating your input when you give this landscape of our tertiary institution, more so the performance of this program. And it seems like it doesn't really align to the market. Now, I was asking myself, what could be the problem? Now, in developing or articulating this policy of bare minimum, what exactly needs to be done so that the program aligns to the market needs? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This is really a very good question, providing the relevance of programs. And let me again reiterate that there is a specific role for these standards to serve. there are multiple measurement tools in quality assurance which take care of diverse things. There is a tool that looks at the institutional performance. There is a tool that looks at the program performance, but there is a specific tool that looks at the professional standards. So we have diverse sets of accreditors out there. National regulators, they usually are looking at the institution and program from generic perspectives. They are not using professional standards to measure the quality or learning outcomes. They are inviting subject-specific experts to judge on it. But we also have professional associations which develop the professional standards because they are the ones who are closer linked to the market, to the profession. So those professional associations, councils, name it, they are developing the standards which are actually addressing the learning outcomes, the key professionals, the skills and competencies required in the market. And they convert them into the standards. And then the accreditation is done, quality assurance is done based on those standards. So as I have said, there are diverse tools and each tool serves its own purpose.
I think a lot of the times in Namibia we struggle understanding the role of professional associations, particularly when it comes to licensing and the whole process of accreditation. And I think you're making that gap becoming clearer and saying there's actually already an engagement there from the professional association through your multiple measuring tools for them to have an input into the standard. Final question we've got final two questions. I'm sorry, you gentlemen, you already had a question, so we'll go with the lady here and the gentleman. Final two questions. Please keep it short. I don't want to come across people as saying, oh, you're really from Damarlogazi. So please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Josiah is my name, coming from Limpopo University. All right, I want to ask Dr. Susanna, equality and quality education, a very important concept, but can we achieve optimal realization of that without policymakers being on the forefront of the whole thing? Why I'm saying so, because if you look at the funding model of higher education in Namibia, for example, largely government is taking the bigger role, and they operate they definitely have got policies that govern how they fund. And you end up with programs that we have 1,000 because students, they are looking at the funding model. If I go to this, no matter how the utility value of the program they want to study, but because the funding model is saying, if you are here, we don't give you what we give you when you are there. How do you balance that? Because if that is not achieved, you're going to have 190 programs that have less than 10 students. Because students are going where funding is, not necessarily where the program that will help them in future is. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And funding higher education is one of the, when we highlight usually the major issues in education, funding becomes at the top of the agenda. And I would say that Namibian government is one of the fewest governments globally that covers 90% of students, right? This was the figure that I was given. So you would see in many contexts 20. Maybe Namibia, given the context here, maybe it should be 100% coverage. But then again, well, in very few systems, I have seen the government covering the private, the scholarships for the private institutions as well. So I would like to credit the government for that as well, because it happens here. Again, we see private providers coming in, right? And the private providers coming in, well, you have to provide equal or higher level of quality so that the students are willing to come and pay. Basically, you are more challenged, the private providers are more challenged when it comes to the competition with the government, because why would I go to the private institution if the government covers me for the public, unless the private provides a superior education over there, then I would definitely go for that one, right? Why everybody else goes for university of, those Ivy League universities in the US, which are all private institutions. there is a quality there, right? So this is what I'm saying, like, well, different governments have different agendas. There are diverse funding mechanisms out there. Maybe there should be some other competitive grants as well, like competitive and innovation funds established in the system. Maybe some other measurements also would be welcome here. But again and again, private institutions, if they are coming into play, they know where they're going. They know their business. They know that is why superior quality would put them in a better position. Plus, there are a diversity of funds out there. Diversification of funding mechanisms for higher education is one of the key issues currently discussed everywhere in the globe, so that the government step back gradually and the institutions take a more proactive role. And this is where we talk about research. If you start capitalizing on research, that could become another source of income. If you start capitalizing on micro-credentials, that will become your other source of income. So private institutions or even public institutions, instead of thinking about, okay, how do I get money from the government, you have to think, how do I make my business work? Diversification of funding, this is the key that each institution needs to start thinking about.
Quickly, just on the issue of trust, how long does it take to build trust with an institution like government in these ecosystems, for instance? Because, you know, if you look at the return periods or the turnaround of building trust, competence when you are a new private institution, what does that time period look like?
For private institutions?
Yeah.
Well,
entering the market as a new player.
Yeah, entering market, well, given that there is a huge competition in any country now, in any country, with the private providers coming in, there should be a strong case to come in. And especially what I have seen as a lacking element in the new, in the submissions for new institutions and new programs is the lack of in-depth market analysis and lack of feasibility study. The institutions, the private, even specifically the private providers, because the governments are being, the government funds the public ones, they come into the market, right? But the private ones, when they come, they are very poor in the feasibility studies. They're just come in thinking, okay, overnight I'm getting to make the money and then it will work. It's a money-making business. No, it's not a money-making business.
Academic capitalism. That's a conversation for another day. And that was from the Sakwan platform that we had. But we have an online question from Mr. Simon that I think ties in beautifully with what you're talking here. He's asking, at what point can the accreditation process mature from program accreditation to system accreditation?
Very good question. Let's say, let me make a reference to the slide that I shared where I talked about diversity of mechanisms in quality assurance. Institutional accreditation, there is the program accreditation, there are all different types of accreditations out there. And you would see globally, if you look at in different countries, you would see frequently changing the directions. For example, in Europe, majority of the countries started with the program accreditation, then after a couple of rounds, they moved on to the institutional and then back. So, and then going for the courses and then doing the targeted reviews. So they're just using diversity of mechanisms to see, based on the cycles of reviews. On average, one cycle of review is 5 years. After the 5 years, after the system-wide analysis is done, and this is one of the good things that needs to be done. I'm not sure to what extent this is actually exercised in the region, but I would say systemic analysis, like systemic thematic reviews based on the accreditation results. That is something that takes us to the core. What needs to be changed in terms of quality assurance? What needs to be changed as a tool? Maybe I have been using this accreditation tool for 20 plus years. That's time to change, time to revive, time to revisit. Well, the system is no longer the same. The education system is no longer, the learners are no longer the same, but we're still using the same quality assurance procedure. So those things also, quality assurance needs its own research.
Okay. There's another question just quickly from online. It says, given the unplanned migration towards online teaching and learning, particularly during COVID, which has somewhat evolved towards hybrid learning post-COVID, what is not critical that there be is it not critical that there should be a standalone standard for information technology as maybe part of the key pillars in your value chain?
It is. It is necessary. It is necessary to acknowledge. We talked about diversification of the system, and we talked that one size never fits it all, right? So that is why for each type of provision, we should be thinking about the new way of approach. What we introduced with the INQAAHE, we talked about it, and we launched the international standards and the guidelines last year. You would see a totally innovative approach in those set of standards, which is a modular approach. And so that modular approach, it embraces the diversity of providers there. There are modules for micro-credentials, modules for online provisions, modules for cross-border providers. We're not the same, right? So the system is diverse, and you have to be catering to the needs of your diverse system. Each provider should be measured by the profile it bears and stands for.
Okay. Oh, I think I was going to make it easier for you as we're finishing, but I have two questions from two DEDs, one from the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, and the other one from the Higher Education, Technology and Innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hand it over to our DEDs to keep us on our toes. Just when we thought we could nap here and yawn, they bring us back to the critical issues of tonight.
Thank you so much. It's not a question per se, but an appreciation for the role of research. And I would like to see in the minimum standards that the institutions of higher learning in Namibia would factor in the research. How are my students doing out there in the work, in the life of work life? So this is with particular reference coming from formal education in schools. How do our teachers teach, actually? So that would be a research area that would be of particular interest to the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, who is the main beneficiary of, the graduating teachers. And especially in the light of us establishing a regulatory body for the teaching profession, which in its own should, the quality assurance of higher education be perfect, perhaps we would not need such a regulatory body for the teaching profession, because going back to 2006, when the professional standards for teachers were released, the outlook of practicing teachers was, well, my tertiary education, my higher education certified me to be a teacher. How come do I need to be, registered and certified again? So that is the space which I think could be enriched with that particular research. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. And I hope also to see not only how the teachers teach, but how the students learn, because that's a critical element. They all learn in diverse ways, and it's only through looking at them that we can help them to learn, actually, become a lifelong learner.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Raimo. The introduction of minimum standards will have far-reaching implications to some of the institutions of higher learning. What we have picked up over the years is that a number of private institutions are registering in the country, registering as universities on paper. But what will happen if we introduce these minimum standards and these institutions do not qualify the nomenclature to be certified as universities and they should be downgraded? Will this not have far-reaching implications to the regulators in terms of changing the nomenclature of these institutions? That's my question.
Well, that's the core.
Is there going to be backlash?
Okay, so we also did some analysis there before we came up with the minimum standards. Basically, as I have introduced in the figures, the three major universities are capturing 77% of students. So we are judging based on the impact on students, not based on the impact of universities, okay? So the minimum standards should have as minimum impact on the students as possible, but not university-wide. So 77% of students are secure, at least. So those institutions that are having like less than 7, and they are still called universities, maybe they have only about 10%, but still it's not even 10% of students. It's very, very minuscule percentage of students that they are having enrolled in their, institutions. So to minimize the impact possible, where with the minimum standards, we're not coming and saying, no, those institutions need to close right away. There is a transition phase that will be established, a grace period provided, so that the system can get used to the typology that we are introducing, so that they could be aligning. So they could be keeping their titles as long as they're meeting the minimum requirements out there. If the university has 70 students and it just does teaching and learning and doesn't offer doctoral program and doesn't do research, that should not be called the university. It could be there providing higher education, but it has to change the title. And if in the transition period they're not meeting the minimum standards, then this is a clear indication that they have to change the status, or there should be some other solution. But there will be a transition phase to adjust to the system. There is nothing that happens overnight.
Any concluding remarks? I think there's a lot being thrown at you here tonight. It seems like the system is layered, it's complex, it's an ecosystem that requires multiple stakeholders to take responsibilities at different levels. But fundamentally, I think for me, the takeaway is that the system must focus on the demand and why people are demanding this and what impact that it has on the demand. And I think sometimes we focus at what we're giving and we're saying, because I'm feeding you this food, you'll just eat. And I say, but I'm diabetic, I can't eat whatever you are giving me. You have to give me a specialized meal. And I think that's what you're giving us, nuance, specificity at various levels, and you're building these layers in a very systemic way. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing to contribute towards the quality assurance here in Namibia. Ladies and gentlemen, please, standing ovation. Let's please give it to Namibia. Thank you very much, Doctor, for coming to this and sharing your knowledge and information with us tonight. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to do the official closing remarks and as well as just to give us the insights in terms of the vote of thanks, there's many people that have made tonight happen. We'd like to invite the Deputy Chairperson of the NCHE, Dr. Francine Kenjela, to give us those remarks. Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause as well.
I trust the deliberations, colleagues as we had them, have equally enlightened and enriched all of us. This evening, I've been tasked to present the vote of thanks on behalf of the entire Council, NCHE, including her critical component, which is the Secretariat, and I will do it in the following manner. We extend our profound gratitude and appreciation to the presenter, Dr. Susanna Karakhanyan, for agreeing to share her expertise on this topic, and for a well-researched and thought-provoking presentation. In the same vein, we express a great appreciation for her selfless insights, attitude, and energy expressed in the process of refining the draft minimum quality standard for higher education in our country. Hence, our big thank you to Doc for all effort spent and for constructively engaging us in this process. We also express our profound appreciation to Dr. Van Kent for sounding their welcome remark on behalf of our line ministry and the critical insight he shared with us as he highlighted the imperatives of the ministry, especially part of their mandate to oversee and ensure the development and coordination of quality higher education in our country. I have no doubt, Doc, that you have indeed reminded us about the seriousness and urgency of the task at hand. We also sincerely thank Prof. John Samuel, the chairperson of the Council, for the insightful introduction of the topic being discussed this evening and the related imperatives. We appreciate all effort, Professor. A special word of welcome and appreciation goes to the Namibian government, institutions present here, professional associations, academic institutions, international sister agencies in higher education quality assurance, students may be present here, all in audience, and the general public for accompanying us in this process and particularly participating in this public lecture. Your presence and appreciation have indeed added value to the narrative, and this is highly appreciated. To the moderator, sir, we thank you so much for your insightful analysis of the subject and for your thought-provoking questions. Your facilitation skills surely enhanced the understanding and relevance of the topic to the development of quality higher education sector in the country. To those who had the opportunity to participate through posing questions or comments in this lecture, we cherish your contribution and would assure you that such comments have added value to the deliberations of today and indeed contributed to the body of knowledge of this subject dealt with this evening. Mr. Moderator or Director of Ceremony, I would like to express our gratitude and profound appreciation to NCHE Secretariat for the job well done in setting up the event of this magnitude, and indeed for ensuring that NCHE mandates is effectively carried out amid a host of challenges. Yes, the table of the colleagues in the Secretariat is overflowing. It's overflowing of activities. I'm not so sure whether their cups is also overflowing, but I know their table is overflowing. And therefore, we wish you colleagues all required wisdom, courage, and energy as you further discharge your assigned duties and responsibilities. Lastly, we extend our gratitude to the media for keeping the public informed about this important lecture and for further dissemination of the highlights emanating from this evening's lecture. To the entire audience, this lecture affirms our conviction in the potential of public lectures to share, spread, and advance knowledge, especially on matters relating to education in general and education quality assurance in particular. We hope to meet you again in the soon coming 12th NCHE public lecture. And I thank you all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the time that we had for you tonight. And I just want to finish with a quick story when I remember, I went to America to study. I came back from an Ivy League school. People were like, yo, now you have American dollars. So initially I'd be like, I feel so guilty that I'm the only one from Damar Lokasi that gets to study there. So here, my friend, this is the least I can do. Then later on, I never had money, right? Then I said, no, Patrick, this year, you are introducing minimum standards. Yes, I introduced my personal minimum standards. I said, each one can ask me twice a year. Not minimum for more than, it must range between 1,000, 1,005. Yeah, because we are talking from the genocide, so we have a lot of people who are landless, foodless, So when I introduced the minimum standards, the ones who were benefiting the most from this unaccountable system, they were the first ones to make a noise. You think you are now, because you want to learn English, you think you can just now have boundaries and standards. And then later on, as time passed, even they were like, no, it's actually a good thing, because I'm not the sole beneficiary. You are now, I've got standards. Also, I know I can budget you now. So it's not a random, I take a chance. So I think there's a dynamic kind of place that we live in, whether it's an institution or as people. But I think sometimes what we call boundaries, minimum standards, at least at least show you've worked a $10 month. Then I would put the other $80 month. At least before you graduate to $100. It creates inertia. But I think it shows and it speaks largely towards accountability. And I think that is what we're prioritizing at the same time as prioritizing quality education, which safeguards the interest of the institution. Because when people say, oh, Patrick Sam University, higher, my friend, there's nothing serious there. The kids go in and out. There's no trust. There's no demand. Just close your doors, Patrick Sam University. But if they are saying, the other university, it does, I think it creates a natural demand and it looks at what we are supplying. And I think more importantly, for me as somebody studying his PhD, the big thing that I'm struggling with is how do systems appreciate people? Not just outputs, not just the number of qualifications, not just the number of people. How do we look at people's lives and honestly take accountability for saying, you came through us, right? So the joke at Columbia University was, if you come through here, they put a chip in your brain, right? That was the joke. Yeah, before Columbia, you don't know if you're going to pass, but afterwards, they put a chip in your brain. That's what the people on the streets are saying. So I think it's important, just as a spirit of education, spirit of institutions, that we prioritize, the care and the support for taking care of people's lives, the knowledge they have access to, because those things can fundamentally change their opportunity, their access, and their mobility in terms of who they are as dignified or as humiliated beings. So I think there's a lot at course here, and I trust that we're in the right hands. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it a round to the NCHE for the 11th public lecture. We will see you again in 2024. Have a good night. There are refreshments outside, please. Also, if you can, there's a little sheet here. Please, your feedback means a lot to us. We would like to involve you in the planning of public lectures. So please, if you have any ideas or themes that you want to investigate, please write them down here at the back of your program, and you can hand it back to one of the organizers. Thank you very much, Namibia. Thank you for joining us online. We'll see you again next year. Have a good night.